Hello again, my little nuggets. We are continuing our unit on nouns. So we've talked about how to identify nouns. We've also covered how to classify nouns as either common or proper, concrete or abstract, collective or compound. Today we're going to talk about making nouns plural. Now I've noticed on many of your papers, we tend to overuse our apostrophes. Lovelies. Except in very rare cases, apostrophes are used to show possession, that a noun owns something or has something. They are rarely and seldom used to create a plural. And so we're going to cover that over the course of this mini lesson and the next mini lesson. Today is pretty straightforward. So by the end of today, you should be able to form plural nouns that end in S, SH, CH, X, Z, F, FE, Y, V, and O. And you should also be able to proofread for these errors in sentences and be looking for those problems with your plural forms. Okay, the first rule is very basic. You know this. We add S. Most of the time, that's what you're going to do. So you can see the examples: boat becomes boats, care becomes cares, storm becomes storms, radio becomes radios, and cup becomes cups. That's very straightforward and easy to grasp. From here on out, here's where they get tricky. And unfortunately, some of these rules, it just comes down to memorizing them. You're just going to have to know them, especially if you don't have spell check or a computer available to you. And lovelies, I know some of you don't believe me, but it will happen, and you don't want to be the one looking like a fool. So, the second rule, if the noun ends in S, SH, CH, X, or Z, that's when you're going to add an ES. So moss ends in two S's, so we add ES. Dish ends in SH, becomes dishes. Clutch becomes clutches. Fox becomes foxes. And Sanchez becomes Sanchez's. So if we're talking about multiple people in the family. Take a second, see if you can see what capitalization error is on this page. Do you see it? There you go. It is indeed clutch. Clutch is a common noun, so it shouldn't be capitalized. Sanchez is a proper noun, so it should be capitalized. But clutch, you definitely would want to fix that if this were on your paper. Moving on. Let's check and see how good you are. So on your worksheet, and we're on plural nouns, Form A. If you look at the bottom of the page, it'll say page 11 in the lower right-hand corner. For part A, what you want to do is write the plural forms for the following 10 words. So take about 10 seconds and show me how awesome you are. Then, when you're ready to resume, hit play and check your answers. Here are your answers. You should have wishes, sharpeners, birches, attics, foxes, torches, thrushes, exams, buses, notice the double S there, and masses. Buses is kind of unique. Obviously, there aren't two S's in the original word, bus. But if we didn't double the S, we would be left with buses, and that isn't what we are going for. So this is a good example of a noun that is somewhat irregular. We'll look at more of those during the next lesson. After you're done checking all your answers, go ahead and go to the next slide and hit play. Okay, the next two rules both relate to what you should do if a noun ends in Y. Most of the time, a consonant will come before the Y, and when that happens, you change the Y to I and add ES. So fly becomes flies, pony becomes ponies, cry becomes cries, and story becomes stories. Notice they all have a consonant. So fly has an L, pony has an N before the Y, cry has an R, and story also has an R. So because the consonant comes before the Y, that's why we add ES. There are exceptions to the rule. You're going to find that with grammar. Almost anytime there's a rule, there's something that doesn't obey the rule, just like in real life. And the exception to the rule for this one is proper nouns. So if you have a family name and it ends in a Y, you're not going to change it to IES. You just leave it the way it is and just add the S like you normally would. Which brings us to rule 4. For these ones, fly, pony, cry, and story, we changed them to IES because there was a consonant before the Y. But if a vowel comes before the Y, you don't do that. All you do is add S. So in boy, we have an O. That's a vowel. Our vowels are A, E, I, O, U. Okay? And basically, anything that's not a consonant is a vowel. So because there's an O there and it's a vowel, I'm just going to add S. The same applies for toy. Just add an S for toys. Day, the vowel is A, so days. Donkey, you have an E before it, so just add an S. And holiday, you have another A before it, so just add an S. All right, are you keeping pace, Nuggets? Good. Okay, next two rules relate to what do you do if it ends in an O? This is one that tends to confuse a lot of people. Again, you're looking to see what comes before the Y, just like you did on the previous slide. You want to look for what comes before the O this time instead of the Y. So, if there is a consonant that comes before the O, that's when you're going to add ES. If there's a vowel, that's when you'll just add S. So you can see this rule is very similar to the rule for Y, and you want to kind of mentally make that connection. So echo, see how there is an H here before the O, that's a consonant, so add ES. For heroes, we have an R as our consonant, so we add ES. Tomato, we have a T, so we add ES. And we have also another T in vetoes, we add ES. Okay. In the right column, you see these are examples where there are vowels. So you see there is an I before the O, so all that we did was add the S. For a cameo is a special appearance. It's also a type of jewelry that has a person's face in relief on it, if you didn't know what that word meant. There is an E before the O, so again, no ES, just add a plain old S by itself. Kangaroo, we have an O, so we add an S. And Julio, if there was more than one, and in many classes there are, some of you know this, some of you suffer from this, especially if your name's Michael, right, Michael? Michael? The I means that you just add an S. The exception to the rule on this slide, a lot of words in our language come from other languages. We do a lot of borrowing in English, particularly from Spanish, Italian, and other languages. So when that happens, the rule doesn't apply with the ES. So for example, if you look at peso, okay, the S does come before the O. So according to my rule number 5, I should be adding ES. But guess what? Pesos is not coming to us from English proper. We're borrowing it from Spanish. So because it's borrowed, we're making it plural the same way we would in that language, and we just add the S. The same goes for piano. Now you notice in the exception I pointed out that most musical terms are Italian. And so for that reason, most musical terms are also not going to follow the rules. So piano, there's an N, it should be ES, but because it is from Italian, it's musical term, we don't add the ES, we just add S. And as always, proper nouns don't like to obey rules, they are rebels. If you have someone's last name, for example, Sakamoto, all right, you would just add an S. Okay, very similar to your rule for Y. All right, you ready to check yourself? Good, do it. Pause this, and again, we're on your worksheet, and you're doing 1 through 10. So take 10 seconds and check yourself. Pause this. Hit play when you're ready to check your answers. All right, so we're ready to check. You didn't cheat, did you? You better not have. All right, so on your paper, you should have donkeys. Just add in an S because it comes with a vowel before the Y. Radios, we have a vowel before the O, so just add S. Echoes, we have an H before the O, so we add ES. For duty, we had a T before the Y, so we change it to IES. Tomatoes, we have ES because we have a T before the O. We had a T before the Y in party, so it becomes parties, IES. Autos, you have a T before the O. Now, technically, you should change this to an E, right? This is another example of an irregular plural. And again, we're going to look more at irregulars or words that really don't obey the rules next class. But this is one example. No ES on this one, even though there is a T. It doesn't follow the rule. Holidays, there's a vowel before the Y, so just add an S. Pantry, there's an R before the Y, so we add IES. And stereo. Stereo is related to music, and it does have a vowel before the O anyway, so we just add S. 100%, right? Awesome. Let's get the last piece. All right, your last rule for the day is what to do if your noun ends in F or a double F. This one is tricky because some words follow this rule and some don't. The best thing I can tell you is to use spell check, check a dictionary, check your phone, or in the absence of any of those items, listen to the way you would say the word in a sentence. A lot of times that'll help you decide whether it does follow the rule or not. Okay, for example, nobody would say wifes. It's hard to say. So wives, we definitely hear the V in that. So here are some other examples. Loaf ends in an F, so we change it to VES, loaves. A wharf, like you go fishing on, turns into wharves. Wolf turns into wolves, and as we said before, wife turns into wives. Lovelies, not all nouns that end in F will follow the rule. And again, this is one of those picky rules. It is obeyed only some of the time. So cliff, you don't say clives or clives. It would be hard to say. We say cliffs, so just add an S. Same thing applies for cuffs. You don't say cuves. That's difficult to say. You say cuffs. Puff, we don't say puffs. We say puffs, so just add an S. Same with giraffes, just add an S. Fairly straightforward. All right, here's your last checkup of the day. You ready to rock this? Do 1 through 10, and then hit play when you are ready to go over the answers. Go ahead, get started. Don't talk. And here are the answers. Loaves, cliffs, wives, dwarves, skiffs, griefs, spoofs, shelves, proofs, and calves. All right, if you need to pause this, check your answers, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, you can let this play and move on to the next slide. This was pretty easy, right? Good. Now it's time for you to get an A++ and show me what you know. So if you flip your worksheet over, you are now going to complete the back on your own. For part A, it's very simple. You just transform each one of those singular nouns into a plural. For part B, it might be a little bit more difficult. What you're doing is you're reading each sentence and you're proofreading for mistakes or plurals that were made incorrectly. So there might be a plural in the sentence that is fine. There might be a plural in the sentence that is incorrect. What you're doing is writing just the plurals correctly on the line. You do not need to write the entire sentence. When you're done with this, turn it in, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye, Nuggets!